One of the other things that you might see here on this plan is all these little circles also mean that this building is going to be 100% code compliant. One of the downfalls of the existing Nichols Library is that it's not necessarily code compliant. For instance, if you're in a wheelchair or you're handicapped, there's no accessible means to get in the library. There's no accessible means to get from the upper floor to the lower floor. The bathrooms are not handicap accessible. And so many of the things within the Nichols Library today do not meet what we call accessibility or egress codes. Now, in addition to that, the town has obviously taken steps to make it a safe building, but the reality is that moving forward, making a code compliant building allows for a safer building. One of the things you might also notice, or that we notice, is that there's flexibility in the site. This site that was purchased by the town for the future building of the library actually has space on it for a second building, as you see here. We have laid out a relatively square building, which would be another 8,000 square foot building if over time the town decides that they need another municipal building. As you see here, there are two proposed sections where a septic system could be built to support these two buildings, and this is our well field, as you see here circled in red. One of the things that we did meeting with the fire chief and the police chief is recognize that the smaller and more efficient that we could make this building actually saves the town money in all sorts of ways. One of the ways is that this building is under 10,500 square feet, which means that by code, and this is the 2009 International Building Code and NFPA 101, you do not need to sprinkle this building for the fact that it's under 10,500 square feet, and we will provide vehicular access for fire trucks and police cars and emergency vehicles up Church Street, into the site, across the parking lot, and we're going to provide reinforced turf in the back of the building so that the fire chief, the fire trucks, the police cars can come down and around the entire building. Having that accessibility available to these emergency vehicles allows us not to sprinkle this building and have a completely code compliant building. In talking with the road agent, it was very important, number one, not to have any curbs around the parking. What this does is it allows rainwater to infiltrate into the site much easier than channeling it along curbs. Number two, it allows the road agent to plow the parking lots and create berms, if you will, of snow storage in these areas without damaging the curbs. And it allows this fire and emergency vehicle access around the site. And we would obviously like to thank all of those people who were involved in this, because essentially what they did was they saved the town the money of having to sprinkle the building, which, as some of you may know, off of a well system requires an underground cistern storage tank, multiple pumps, emergency generators, which is much more than a traditional building would need in terms of sprinklering if you had a water line, say, down Church Street. One of the other things that you might notice about the site, if you have a chance to drive by, is that it's relatively flat. In fact, you can see here that there are only contours, which is changes in site level, towards the back of the site. One of the things, working closely with the road agent, was to acknowledge his request to actually raise the building. So as we excavate for foundations along the perimeter of the building, we're going to use those soils as backfill to actually get the building as high as we can so that it meets handicap accessible entrances and allows the rainwater to slope away from the building. Number one, this promotes better drainage across the site. Number two, it prevents any kind of future flooding, if you will, on such a flat site. And number three, it really gives an architectural prominence to the building itself as you drive into the site. And the prominence we're talking about is some early sketches that we did to take advantage of the Kingston architecture that we were talking about. This is the front of the building here, and as you can see, one of the things we wanted to do was set off the main entrance, which is here, with some level of clear story lighting, with some level of a tower, if you will. But the reality is we're using a very cost-efficient dormer in order to get that image of the Kingston architecture onto the building. We're also brought in the idea of possibly using some columns along the exterior entrance of the building, and then accenting the building with some stone, but using the clapboards, thereby marrying the two prominent materials in town of both siding and masonry.